Hello there, YouTube. So, there has been a trend going round on Booktube, and I thought I'd jump in and take part. So, the trend, as it currently stands, is that annoyingly in the shot? No, it's not. Okay, fair enough. I thought my tripod was in the shot. Right. Always find distracting things in the background, like where you can't quite tell what it is, annoys me when I'm watching Booktube, so... Anyway, there's been a trend going around on Booktube, and it's basically a TBR video. That's all it is. It's just a TBR video, but, and this is the crucial thing, it's divided by genre. So that makes it different and new. And the stupid thing is I'm going to do it anyway, because it does make it different enough that I want to give it a go. So yeah, I'm gonna do one of these stupid, TBR videos, and this one in particular is the next 15 sci-fi books you intend to read. Now, I'm gonna say straight off, I have been extremely liberal with my definition of sci-fi. So my definition of sci-fi includes space operas and dystopians for the sake of this video. It normally wouldn't. I would normally divide them up into separate things, but I wanted to keep it to 15. So I've been very, very broad. I've also included books that arguably are not sci-fi at all. They're fantasy and space. Because I don't know, because I've not actually read them yet. So some of these may not really be very sciencey sci-fi. But there'll still be more sci-fi than some people's lists, because I actually consider, science to be the core function of what is sci-fi. So mine are going to be more sci-fi than the vast majority of sci-fi fans claim when they make a sci-fi list. I'm usually quite strict. So when I say I'm being liberal, what I mean is my definition of sci-fi for this video is approximately similar to what most people mean when they say sci-fi, and it's still likely more strict than the likes of Moid from Media Death Cult, who believes that his Dark Materials is sci-fi. Yeah, just take that in for a minute. So yeah, let's go into this, because I don't want this video to go on forever. I've got 15 books here. Now, the idea of this is make a stack of books in the genre that is going to be your grab list, the pile of books that you're just going to grab and pick from when you're next planning to read from that genre. So that's what I've done. And this is in no particular order. These are the books that I intend to read from the books I physically own in sci-fi in the next few months. That doesn't mean I won't read others. That doesn't mean others can't jump the list. But these are the ones that I currently own that I plan to read next. Some of them are rereads. So some of them are books I've read before, yeah. Anyway, let's move on. Right. So the first one I've got is A Fire Upon the Deep. This is a book I've had recommended a couple of times. It's classic sci-fi meets fantasy, and that intrigues me. Right. There's a few books like this where they've got the fantasy aesthetic. You can see the castle and the knight, but it's also set in a sci-fi world. Apparently Book of the New Sun is supposed to be that. Book of the New Sun doesn't feel like that, though. Book of the New Sun feels like fantasy all the way through, right? I don't know why people claim it's sci-fi. I know it's got very, very loose sci-fi elements very much in the background, but it doesn't feel like it. I'm hoping this marries the two genres much, much better. So I'm interested to see how this works. There's actually a few that do this. So Fire Upon the Deep, one I'm looking forward to. Next, I've got a good old traditional space opera. I've got Alistair Reynolds' Terminal World. But again, if we look at this, those look like steampunk airships on the front. So I have no idea what this actually is. Terminal World's a snarling, drooling, crazy-eyed mongrel of a book, equal parts steampunk, western, planetary romance, and far future sci-fi. I really don't know what to expect with this. Now, I love steampunk as a setting. when it's done well. And I'm really enjoying westerns at the moment. So this sounds like it's going to be fascinating. I'm really looking forward to delving into this. I don't know what to expect, but yeah. A good merge of various different genres. Gonna try this out. Now this is even more traditional space opera, because we're going to the Culture series with Consider Fleabus. Now this is a reread, but it's been a long time since I've read the Culture series. So I want to start it again, and I want to read from book 1, and I'm going to read through because I want to review them for this Booktube channel. And Consider Fleabus is the first one. The others are a little smaller. They're actually shockingly small books, given how much is packed into them. But the Culture is such a tempo of sci-fi space opera that, yeah, I want to go over it, and I want to be able to review it for you guys, and I want to read it again so that I can go into detail in my reviews. Because whilst I've read this one before, I read it 7 years ago. So it's a long time since I've read this one, right? And I'd like to be able to go in detail and not mess any of it up, right? So that's the first 3 so far. I've got some good classic space opera-y sci-fi stuff. No one's going to complain about those. This one might be a bit contentious, but I want to get a range. So I've got The Darkest Minds by Alexander Bracken. This is arguably sci-fi, but I'm not sure. This is a YA dystopian sci-fi. It's very discoloured there from where I've had it on my window, and the curtains only come down this far. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this works, because from what I understand, this is kind of like X-Men style dystopia, with genetics and things like that thrown in. So if that's the case, interesting sci-fi, and it's different from all the space opera, which is nice. Next we have Recursion by Blake Crouch. I know nothing about this book. I have started it twice, read the first chapter a couple of times, put it down because I've had something else on, and keep not going back to it. It's not because I don't want to read it, it's because I keep having something come up just as I'm about to read it, and then not going back to it. So I actually want to try and read this. I read Dark Matter, thought Dark Matter was decent, but it didn't do its concept well enough. So I want to go back to this. I want to go back to this author. I want to go and try to see if he can do a decent sci-fi that really explores its concepts well. And I've heard that Recursion is one of those ones where you either love Recursion and don't much like Dark Matter, love Dark Matter, don't much like Recursion, or on a very small case, there's people who just absolutely love both. So perhaps because I was a bit underwhelmed by Dark Matter, maybe Recursion will be the one that I really gel with. Who knows? This one, again, not sure how much sci-fi there will be in this. This is maybe more post-apocalyptic dystopia, but I have Metro 2033 by Dmitry Schleigelhoffen. I'm not going to try and pronounce that name. That name. Yeah, that's Schleigelhoffen as far as I'm concerned. Any name I can't pronounce is Schleigelhoffen from now on. So yeah. Metro 2033. I know that it involves a nuclear apocalypse and people living on a train in Russia, I believe. That's as far as I know. So, sounds interesting. Next, I have Children of Time. Again, this is one that I have DNF'd. I read about half of it, and then I put the damn thing down. And I want to go back to it. I don't remember why I put it down. I was enjoying it. It's a good book. It was a buddy read from over a year ago. What was it? Why did I put it down? Something must have been happening in my real life that made me put it down. But yeah, Children of Time. It's a space opera with a twist. I'm not going to spoil the twist here for those who don't know it. I do already know the twist, but it's interesting. It's sci-fi. It's very much hard sci-fi, but it's got a different take, and it's merging bio sci-fi with space opera in some nice twisty ways that you don't see very often. So excited to see how it concludes. Next I have Annihilation. This is by Jeff Vandermeer. This is not particularly a long book. Creepy and fascinating, says Stephen King. He must read absolutely fucking everything, because he's blurbed on almost anything. I don't know much about this. I've heard that it's a sci-fi dystopia. I don't know how much actual sci-fi is in it, or whether or not it's just dystopian. It could just be a dystopian thriller for all I know. That's still my bookmark in it from where I started it last time. But yeah, I started it. I got a dozen pages in, and then never got any further. But yeah, I'm going to read that, because, again, it was a book I started. I put it down for some reason. I don't know why. I keep doing this. A lot of these books I start, I never seem to get very far. I keep getting distracted. ADHD brain hitting. So yeah. Next, I have another one which is described as sci-fi, but it's also described as literary fiction, which means it could be pretentious bollocks. And that is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. Now, I read The Bone Clocks, and I really liked The Bone Clocks. It was a really good book. It was a kind of a fantasy, magical realism kind of thing, where it's almost the real world, but there's like a small smidgen of magic thrown in. So that was The Bone Clocks. It was a really, really good book. Very interesting, very different. So Cloud Atlas is like the book he's most famous for, I believe. I want to give it a read, because a load of people rave about it and say it's very, very strange and different, and unlike anything else you've read. So I'm going to try it out. David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. Next, I want to get back into reading The Expanse. The Expanse is fantastic. I got about halfway through Caliban's War, and I don't know why, again, I put this bloody thing down. I must have been in the middle of something, and it distracted me again, because I really, really like Leviathan's Wake. I was really enjoying this. Why did I stop reading it? Who knows? So I'm going to go back to The Expanse. I'm going to read Caliban's War. I'm probably going to read others. I've got like the first 6 books. So yeah, this is, by the way, one of the books where I've backed the book in plastic. Where you can see I've done that. There's a tutorial on how to do this, by the way, on Brian Lee Durfee's channel. And you get the occasional little bubble on it, but it doesn't half protect them. So I want to do that to all my other books as well. I've only done it to a few of them, but it doesn't half keep them nice. So yeah, I'm going to try and do that with future books as well. Next one is a reread. This is a huge one, but I want to be able to do a proper review of this. So I'm gonna reread it, and I want to go through it, chapter by chapter, as it were. Kind of do like vlogs as I go through this book. And that is Pandora's Star by Peter F. Hamilton. This is a space opera around wormhole technology, where they have trains to travel between various different planets. And they are developing faster and faster, like, ships that can move between planets, because whilst they've got this, like, wormhole technology that you can travel, you still need to set up the first point. And to do that, you need to send a ship out to the planet, build the first station, then you can get, these wormhole tech stuff to get you between it. The Commonwealth Saga. It's cool. There are more books written. There's a second book in this series, and there's other spin-offs that are in the same universe. So we can continue on with them after I've given this a reread. But like I say, I want to give this a reread. This is not the one I read, by the way. This is basically brand new and barely touched. Gorgeous, gorgeous looking book. If you actually tried to read this, it would not look like this. It would be all creased and horrible. It's why I want to back everything in plastic like this, so they actually look nice and stay looking nice. Right, so, next one on my list. This one is arguably not sci-fi at all, and again, this is another one that I read about half the book. And again, I don't know why I put the bloody thing down. I didn't realise until I started doing this video just how much I do this. Just how many times I pick books up, I read halfway through, I read a quarter of the way through, I put them down, I pick a different book up. I didn't realise just how scatterbrained I am, how non-committal I am with books. I have read the first third of most of my books. Why don't I finish them? And it's not just the sci-fi books as well. Same with the fantasy books. I was thinking about reading Name of the Wind earlier. I've also read the first half of Name of the Wind. Why didn't I finish that one? I've read the first half of Gardens of the Moon. I didn't finish that one. I do this with everything. So yeah, I'm going to start finishing my books. This is why I need a Booktube channel. It's so that I can have a conversation with you guys, and we can keep each other abreast of what's going on. I can tell you what I'm reading, and by having the conversations, I'll be prompted to continue going. But yeah, Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruccio. Now, this is fantasy. I'm sure this is fantasy. Based on what I've read so far, it's basically the Roman Legion meets Star Wars. It's set in space, but I don't think there's much in the way of sci-fi in this. I think this is space fantasy. But I've put it in this list because I don't know for sure. I don't know exactly how the series is going to go. It could go very, very sci-fi later on. Let's face it, Dune seems like space fantasy in places, but Dune has other parts that are very much sci-fi. It depends on how you look at them. But yeah, I'm not sure this would count as sci-fi. Like, this may be a real stretch, but it's definitely one I want to read. It's definitely one I want to go through, and whether it's sci-fi or not, I want to put this on my list because I want to read through it, and I couldn't think of anything else to put on the list in its place. So it's on the list. The last one of this selection here. This is a bind-up, so this is technically 2 books, but it is The Hyperion Omnibus by Dan Simmons, and this is another one to go back to the first 2 that are like sci-fi fantasy hybrids, which again, you could argue Empire of Silence is the same thing, but whereas Empire of Silence might be fantasy in space, I believe this is actually like sci-fi fantasy hybrid, where it's got fantasy elements and sci-fi elements that kind of bounce off each other. And this has got both Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion. So both books are the same thing. Again, I'm going to have to back it in plastic because if you look here, I don't know how well this will show up on the camera, but the edge of the cover kind of rolls and peels. I've not read this book yet, but just taking it on and off the shelf, just moving it about, showing it off on camera, it's already peeling. I don't know if you can see where it's peeling there. If I'd read this whole cover would just pull away. So I need to back these in plastic, or they're going to be ruined. Which is stupid, but it's the way it is. Now, I do have 2 more books to make it into a 15 book set. These 2 are some of my leatherbounds. And that is because I want to do a couple of smaller reviews where I talk about smaller works and classic works. So I've got a bit of classic sci-fi on here. I've got my H.G. Wells collection, because I want to go through each of these stories and review them all individually and chat about them. I think that'll be interesting. So I've got H.G. Wells on here. They're all stories we're familiar with, I'm sure. I also have the larger 7 novels by Jules Verne, which doesn't have a list of the novels on the back or anything. So I'm going to have to open it up and show you on the inside. There's the contents, so you can see what novels are in it. A good list there. But yeah, I want to go through these because I think this is going to be a fascinating journey. Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, I don't know if they're going to feel like sci-fi when you read them compared to modern sci-fi. I think they're going to feel like they're their own genre entirely. because they're speculative science fiction set in a future we've already gone past that didn't happen. So will they feel like sci-fi, or will they feel like alternate history fiction? Will they feel like alternate history fantasy? I think they're going to feel like the latter. And I think it's gonna make for a fascinating experience. I also wonder, could you write stories in the style of, say, Jules Verne, where you write, like, effectively, I suppose that's what steampunk and dieselpunk and things like that are. It's writing sci-fi stories with today's mentality and today's writing techniques, but set it in a future that never happened, where we diverged from, say, the 1850s and technology went a different way. I wonder if that would be fascinating. I think that's the appeal of steampunk and dieselpunk and all of those weird fictions. I think that's where the appeal really lies. So, yeah, that's something I want to explore there. And I'm actually going to discuss that more in the next video I'm going to make, because I'm going to put this one up, but there's going to be a companion video going up fairly soon after. I can't record it now because the battery on my camera is dying, because this camera is, well, crap basically, and has to be charged using this battery pack because I broke the charger because it was old as hell. And it takes hours and hours to charge, so I've only got enough time to record one video right now. I'm going to have to upload this video and then immediately put the camera on charge and hope that I can charge it fast enough that I can then record something else later tonight. But I've got a second video I want to make, which is going to be my 15th fantasy. And there's going to be some steampunk stuff there, but that's going to be more fantasy steampunk, because I think that's where the crossover between sci-fi and fantasy is going to really merge for me. But at the same point, with things like Fire Upon the Deep, Hyperion, Terminal World, there's also that science fantasy merge that I'm excited to get behind and see where it all fits together. I'm more and more excited to try and find science fiction fantasy mixing and see how well they can play off each other. I think it's where Flintlock fantasy works for me as well. Flintlock fantasy is another case of that Jules Verne, H.G. Wells style sci-fi, where we're examining what could be with this new technology, but we've added in a bit of fantasy elements as well. It's one part of what draws me to urban fantasy, I think, is the modern day. The modern day setting merged with the fantasy elements, rather than all fantasy, like epic fantasy, and that all being set in a medieval world. While I love that setting, I really like medieval history and medieval worlds, I do sometimes wish there was a wider variety. I want to see more futuristic settings with fantasy. I want to see more sci-fi that's not necessarily set in a future space environment. I want to see a merge and a mixing of these genres and see what we can get. And of course, there's always the chance that you can mix in horror with that. So, yeah, that companion video is going to be coming out. And I hopefully will be able to put that up as soon as I can. It's all going to be based on how long it takes for this damn battery to recharge. So, thanks for watching. Hopefully this was an interesting video. I will have some reviews coming out soon. I have reviews planned. I wasn't able to record them because I had workmen in the house. And they've been tearing out my staircase and putting in a fresh staircase. Tearing up my floorboards, putting in fresh floorboards. So, it's been hectic here for the last week and a half. Then, of course, my landlord decided he wanted to sell the house. So I've had surveyors come round and people photographing the house because the house is up for sale. I'm being kept on under tenant in situ, so that's fine. Everything will be fine at my end. But yeah, I've had one hell of a busy couple of weeks. But I'm going to have a couple of reviews coming out, and these books will hopefully be appearing in some later reviews, because this is the trajectory I'm hoping to go in with some of these sci-fi books, the fantasy books I'm going to mention, and a few others. So, this was interesting, and it's basically a TBR video, but it had a new spin, and I think it made it just a little bit more interesting than what I plan to read next. This is the next sci-fi books I'm excited to read. And hopefully you're excited to hear my opinions on them, because I plan to tell you all about them fairly soon. My next sci-fi review is probably going to be Leviathan Wakes, because you'll notice that the second Expanse book was on my list. That's because I am planning to review Leviathan Wakes fairly soon. That's going to be one of the first reviews that goes up. So hopefully you enjoy that review, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.